What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, March 27th, 2019, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday, and whatever fate has in store for all of us. Not that I believe in fate. I think predestination was doomed from the start. Anyway, let's get into it. We've got a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to just grab that phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and opinions. So let's get right on into it. And we are still seeing, and we'll continue to see for quite some time, the fallout from the Robert Mueller report. And basically, you know, a lot of people are still coming to grips with this. A lot of the liberals, a lot of the corporate media, they're trying to deal with this and find some way to restore their reputation, their credibility, or just, you know, they're off in their little safe rooms with their Play-Doh and their bubble wrap and whatever it is that they're doing. But you know, this was this thrilling conspiracy theory. That's what it was. It was a conspiracy theory that the highest levels of the U.S. government had been infiltrated by the Kremlin. And it had no truth to it at all. I mean, our government has been infiltrated by Israel at its highest level. No question about that. But hey, no big deal about that. But those Russian, you know, Israeli infiltration is good, and Russian infiltration, that's bad. So anyway, the left is really struggling with this thing. And the biggest problem facing the corporate elites, whether it's corporate media or the corporations that back the liberals, is how to emerge from this crisis with their power and reputations intact. Good luck on that last one. Now, you've got basically, Russiagate was never about substance. It's about who gets to image manage the story. And the leaders of the Democratic Party are less terrified of Trump and what he represents than they are of we the people and what we might do now that we understand how much they have rigged the political and economic system to their permanent advantage. And there probably is the biggest lesson out of Russiagate. The extent to which we're being lied to. I used to hold up ClimateGate as an example of a wide-ranging conspiracy to defraud the people. Well, ClimateGate just got pushed down to second place, and Russiagate, that's it. Look how many people took part in this massive lie. All of the corporate media, the Hillary Clinton campaign, the DNC, all the Democrats, just churning it and churning it and churning it, and they were just out for blood here. And now it's over. And the news media and the national security state, the intelligence agencies, Democrats have a lot to answer for. So let's see. Tar, check. Feathers, check. Rope, check. Rails, check. Yep, about time to do that. Rudy Giuliani is demanding that Cuomo apologize for the collusion hype. Good luck on that one. You're not going to see any of these people apologize. I mean, look at Zucker over at CNN. No, we were doing our job right. You know, we have nothing to apologize for. But Giuliani is saying we need to find out who is responsible. And he's absolutely right about that. I never thought I would agree with Giuliani on anything. But he's absolutely right. Now, I think probably a lot of people who were caught up in the Russiagate narrative acted in good faith. They actually believed it was true. They were lied to. They wanted to believe the lie, which doesn't excuse them believing the lie, but they got lied to. What we're looking for are the people who said, let's come up with this phony story about how Russia helped Trump win the election so we can explain away why Hillary was unable to win the most rigged election in recent history, which is basically what we're talking about here. All right. Rand Paul wants Obama officials investigated for inventing the Russian conspiracy hoax. And yes, they may have had a part of it. And apparently Clapper is crumbling. We may start to be seeing the unwinding of all of this, the unwinding of the deep state. James Clapper was on CNN saying that Obama was the one who ordered the investigation into the Trump campaign. Well, the finger pointing has begun, by golly, and may it endure forever, or at least until we get all the bad guys here. Jerome Corsi is opting to continue his legal fight against Mueller and fellow prosecutors with a bar complaint for prosecutorial misconduct and a $350 million lawsuit. They have to pay for this, Corsi told the Washington Examiner on Monday. Yes, he should do this. You know, it's the GOP's turn at bat. The liberals had their shot. The Russiagate people had their shot. The corporate media had their shot. Now it is time for payback. And we're not talking about revenge here, because revenge can be a waste of time. We're talking about setting a precedent so that nobody in the future dares lie to the American people to this extent ever again. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network, and we're talking about the continuing fallout from the release of the Mueller report and how the lefties are still desperate to hang on to it. And we know there was collusion. We believe there was collusion. Miss Cleo told me there was. Here. Okay, over in Rachel Maddow land, her ratings have dropped 20% over the last 2 days. Well, why not? The release of the Mueller report proved that she shamelessly deceived her audience for more than 2 years. And Rachel Maddow, I mean, she was the Russia hoax queen. She was Grand Central Station for all the stories about Russia collusion here. And so she's lost 20% of her audience so far. She may continue to lose more of her audience because I'm sure her viewers right now are going to be watching her and saying, well, let's see. She lied to us shamelessly about Trump's Russia collusion. Are we sure she's telling us the truth about whatever it is she's talking about at that moment? That's going to be the big problem here. Now, out here in Hawaii, we have a senator, Mazie Hirono. And she's out there saying that Putin must be really happy about the Mueller investigation, finding no conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russia. And basically went on to attack the idea that there's a cozy relationship between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. There used to be. You know, we were getting along good with Russia. This whole Russiagate hoax has damaged our relationship with Russia for the long term. And I don't think Putin and Trump are buddy-buddy anymore. But Hirono, who's unwilling to let go of it, is out there saying, you know, this friendship between Trump and Putin, it's not good for our country. Now, remember, this is from the same senator who did not know it's illegal for immigrants to step across our border without permission. So I wouldn't give her too much weight on this one. Now, here's an interesting little question, and it came out of Zero Hedge. Did Mueller know there was no Trump-Russia collusion before the midterms? Now, you think about that, because the Democrats were campaigning on Russiagate, you know, right up to the casting of the ballots in November. If Mueller had released his report before that, the GOP would still be in control of the House of Representatives. There's no question Russiagate influenced the election in the favor of the Democrats. Well, here's the follow-up, because apparently Justice Department insiders have basically confirmed that the special counsel team concluded in August of last year that there was no collusion, and they started winding down their investigation at that point. So Mueller finished the probe months before the midterms and kept silent while the Democrats swept the midterm elections. How's that for politics? How's that for meddling right there? We don't have to go to Russia to find meddling in our elections. Right there, Robert Mueller here. And so a lot of people are now starting to ask, after Google manipulated search results and the leftist media hawked the Russian collusion hoax, should we do the midterm elections all over again? It's not as absurd as you might think when you realize how much rigging there was, how many illegal immigrants were voting, how much election fraud there was. Yeah, I think we ought to have the midterms done over again. And make sure no illegals vote. Make sure those machines aren't cheating. And basically remind everybody that Donald Trump, at least, and so there's probably going to be another legal standoff over documents. And what's going on here? They don't know that there's anything there. This is more of the fishing expedition. The Democrats are just trying to move the goalposts. Okay, so the Russian collusion thing didn't work out. Let's talk about his tax returns. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about all this other stuff. Let's talk about health care. And they're still on the attack here. And, you know, I'm waiting to see what Trump is going to do. And, you know, remember the one time, this was a huge embarrassment, Rachel Maddow got a leaked copy of one of Trump's tax returns, and that turned out to be a nothing burger. So, now, earlier, we were seeing all these Democrats who are out there screaming for the full Mueller report to be released, just screaming for it. Well, apparently, they're flipping. Apparently, word has leaked on out that there is stuff in the Mueller report that touches the Obamas and the Clintons. Remember that William Barr made that oblique reference about criminal referrals to some of the Clinton people. So now all of a sudden they're saying, no, where the voters aren't interested. Apparently Elizabeth Warren was being interviewed by Stephen Colbert, and he said, basically, she supports its release, but it's not the primary focus of voters, especially in the early primary state of New Hampshire. Well, I have a lot of family in New Hampshire. It's where I grew up. And yeah, they're interested in the full report. So when are we going to go after all these social media monopolies which censored everybody that was out there saying, we doubt the collusion story? They were trying to silence us. They were violating our right to freedom of speech. And of course, the liberals are out there saying, well, they're a private company. They can do business with whoever they want. Mind you, these are the same liberals who go ballistic when a baker refuses to make a gay wedding cake. Little double standard there. So you have this Facebook, Google, big media, this Orwellian, authoritarian, totalitarian dictatorship that has been imposed on all of us for the last 2 years. And Trump needs to do something about that. We who had the truth were being silenced while the lies were just being force-fed to you from that corporate media. And the corporate media is now sitting there trying to figure out, what are we going to do now? You know, they actually thought the Mueller report was going to have something in there leading to impeachment, and they had their news schedule already laid out into the future about, well, today we're going to cover this, and that day we're going to interview this person, and we're going to get a panel together on that day, and it's not happening. So apparently MSNBC's ratings overall have fizzled. And what's really interesting is that several hours before Barr's letter was released, former intelligence officer Malcolm Nance predicted on MSNBC the report could technically eclipse Benedict Arnold in its level of treasonous activity. Wrong, Malcolm. Guess you're not really a good intelligence officer, are you? Donald Trump is saying, I think this is probably the most consequential media screw-up of the last 25 to 50 years. he is correct about the scale and scope of it, but he's wrong about it being a screw-up. This was not a screw-up. This was intentional. This was a plan. This was literally an attempted media coup d'etat against the sitting president of the United States of America. And mind you, I'm very disappointed in Donald Trump, but I believe in protecting the process. And what the corporate media did to Donald Trump, what the Democrats did to Donald Trump, what the Department of Justice and the FBI did to Donald Trump are all wrong. So, remember Cheryl Atkinson. She used to be a CBS reporter, Emmy Award winner, and she basically got kicked off of CBS because she went rogue. She wouldn't toe the storyline. And so now she's written an op-ed for The Hill this week, and she says it's time for the media and the FBI to apologize to Trump and a whole lot of other people. And she basically pointed out members of the intelligence community and the corporate media have damaged themselves because they allowed themselves to be politically weaponized. And that's exactly what happened. Now, over at The Intercept, Glenn Greenwald alleges he was banned from MSNBC. And, well, we know what that feels like here. Apparently, MSNBC banned him and other left-wing journals with very high journalistic credentials because of their coverage of the Mueller probe. So apparently they weren't left-wing enough. CNN's Jeff Zucker is still out there being unapologetic for 2 years of CNN's Russia-Trump collusion story and saying that he's entirely comfortable with CNN's coverage. And continues to say, look, we're reporters and journalists. We're not investigators. Well, Jeff, if you're not investigators, then you're not reporters. You are stenographers. That's what you are. You're simply transcribing what the politicians told you. Anyway. Okay, the Democratic chairman of the House Judiciary Committee said he'll summon Attorney General William Barr before the panel to explain concerning discrepancies in the Justice Department's decision not to pursue obstruction charges against President Donald Trump. See, they've moved the goalposts again. You know, forget collusion. Now we've got obstruction. How can you have obstruction of justice when a crime did not occur? That's really the issue here. Mueller said there was no collusion. Trump and his people didn't do anything. How can there be obstruction if there wasn't a crime? And Mueller never said that he or any of his people were obstructed. They're trying to make another mountain out of a molehill. And again, they're going to try and ride it into the 2020 elections here. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Don in the Philippines. Aloha, Don. I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yes, it's hard to figure out what's going on with Trump. Maybe we're gonna have to wait until maybe 8 years from now. Oliver Stone will make the movie about Trump, like he did with JFK and with Nixon and all that. Maybe we'll finally figure out what's going on. But Trump said, he hinted about 6 months, or maybe 4 months ago, he hinted that he's going to release those documents unredacted, which he hasn't done yet. He hasn't released the FISA warrant, the full FISA warrants.
Yeah, we need to get that stuff out there. Anyway, listen, Don, stay on the line. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And before we go back to Don in the Philippines, of course, because of the promo that just played here, once again, Republic Broadcasting is asking for your help. And I want to start off, first of all, by thanking everybody who has donated. And I understand from Mike in the control room that there was an increase in donations following our little technical hiccup that we had earlier in the month. And it means that people are recognizing we're running right on the edge here. I mean, this stuff is being held together with duct tape and baling wire. Each new equipment failure is basically a disaster. And again, it's something to think about, that all these people, for the last 2 years, all this corporate media that fed you that constant lie of Russiagate, Trump and Russia working together, Trump betrayed the country. They got lots of money, not as much as they used to have because they've lost a lot of their audience, but they've got money. They got lots of equipment. They've got spares on the shelf. If something breaks, they just slap in a spare and they stay on the air. We don't have that luxury. Every failure of a mixer board or a computer can just take us right off the air or off the net. That's how serious it is. So please keep those donations coming. And the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during normal business hours, extension 3 at all other times. And the network thanks you. And remember, we are the people's media. We're not the corporate media. We are the people's media. We are your media. And we need your help to keep going. So thank you very much. Okay, back to Don in the Philippines. And we're talking about where Trump was saying he was going to release these visa documents, and he hasn't. Now would be a good time to do it. And again, I'm going to give him a couple of weeks, but I'm waiting to see what Donald Trump is going to do now that the Mueller report is out, and all of his enemies have been shown to be liars. And I know there's these other investigations that are going on. But right now, Trump is triumphant in the eyes of the American people. And now is his time to basically move on these things.
Well, he said, I think he hinted before that it would be more advantageous politically for him to wait. Maybe he's waiting until just before the elections, the 2020 elections, because and then he'll just dump everything right then, and so he can actually, then it'll be fresh in people's mind when they go to vote. That's what he kind of hinted that he was going to do. It'd be better for him to wait for a while before.
I disagree. I disagree, but because by 2020, the FISA story is going to be ho-hum in the eyes of the American people. Right now, the American people, are outraged at having been lied to, and now is the moment where more of the lies need to be exposed to sort of capitalize on the situation. Trump needs to exploit this moment.
Yeah, you would hope so, but Trump is hard to figure out. It's hard to figure out anything he does, but people think he was pretty good for playing it cool and letting this, and he was, and because now he's triumphant with since the report came out and he's vindicated. But on the other hand, he could have just fired Mueller from the beginning and fired Rosenstein and fired, then he could have got back. He could have fired everybody. But he didn't do that, so it's hard to figure out Trump. That's why I say we got to wait for.
He didn't need to.
No, he didn't need to, but he wasted all this time just waiting around.
Well, basically, had he fired, look at the fury that they threw at him for firing James Comey, who was clearly incompetent and clearly not doing his job relative to Hillary Clinton and the email server scandal. So had Trump fired Mueller, they would have brought up Archibald Cox and Richard Nixon and that whole mess. So Trump just let him go. He basically gave them enough rope where they've hanged themselves now. And so right now, when the American people are on his side and against the corporate media and the Democrats, now's the time to really push and get more of this stuff exposed.
Well, he can do whatever he wants. He's the president, but Yeah, like I said, we're just going to have to wait till he's dead, till he's out of office and Oliver Stone makes the movie. Then we'll be able to figure it out. I'll let you go, Mike. Thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot here, and we do have more callers waiting on the line, but I'm not going to take them until after this next commercial break here. This is Trump's moment. This is the first time in his administration where he is politically on top, and he should take advantage of it. And like I said, I'm going to give him about 2 weeks to see what he's going to do. And if he doesn't do anything, then he's a one-term president. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones here. Art off the grid. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. We don't have much around here in the line of talk radio, so basically what we got is Glenn Beck for 3 hours and then Rush Limbaugh for 3 hours. But I find it interesting how Rush Limbaugh can go 3 days straight and basically talk about nothing except the Mueller report. I find this very interesting. But since this seems to be a big topic for everybody right now, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm not really a big fan of Rush Limbaugh, but he did lay out a scenario for people to consider. And so I want to kind of throw this at you and then follow up with something else that kind of ties into this as well. Consider the hypothetical. If you, Mike, let's say for whatever the scenario is, let's say you push a narrative that Iran is doing something, okay?
Yeah.
And for 2 years, it's Iran's doing this, trust me, people. I've got inside information. I've got trusted sources that are telling me that this is going to happen and Iran's going to suffer the consequences. At the end of 2 years, the bottom fell out, just like the Mueller report here. What would you do? What do you think the listeners do? Probably a lot of them would tune out. And what would you do, being a man of honor, which I believe you are? First of all, I believe you would be incredibly outraged that these people that you trusted had misled you to that degree. And on top of that, I'm sure you would come on air, again, being a man of honor, which I believe you to be, and deeply apologize and beg forgiveness of your listeners. Now, I believe that to be the case with you and most of the people on RBN. But when we look at the mainstream media, where are the apologies? Now, given that, let's remember back to the Kavanaugh hearings. There were people who were asking Congress to investigate Brett Kavanaugh. And Congress repeatedly said, we are not an investigating agency. That's not what we do. But yet, after the Mueller report didn't give them what they want, now all of a sudden, Congress wants to investigate. Hold on a second. Wait a minute. I thought you weren't an investigative agency.
Yeah. And Congress, I mean, there can be congressional investigations into, the government itself. But again, you have to ask the question, they're edging very close to that separation of powers doctrine. But at this point, everybody is so rabid to get Donald Trump. The rules don't matter anymore. In fact, a lot of them don't even know the rules. I keep going back to Mazie Hirono not knowing that it's illegal for an immigrant to step across our border without permission. Some of these people are really very clueless, and you have to wonder, by what means do they wind up running this country?
Well, I think a lot of it we have to look at the people that are doing the voting. But I mean,
well, I would say we have to look at the people doing the vote rigging.
Well, yeah, that too. But I just find it amazing how, when it's one thing, it's one way. When it's something else, it's completely flipped on its head. And nobody seems to know anything about what anybody's doing anymore. And it's like there are no apologies. There's no regret. These people have no shame whatsoever. They're just plain and simple out to destroy anyone and everyone who does not agree with them. And I bet you if you disagreed with them on the shade of green of the grass, they would probably look to politically destroy you simply because you disagree with the shade of green. I mean, this is how ridiculous these people have gotten.
Yeah, it's rather, how should I put this? It's saddening. It's almost heartbreaking to see this government this factionalized. But if my prediction of a Soviet Union-style collapse is correct, this is one of the stages we have to go through. It does seem like the infighting is continuing, and we have part of the system is going to back off and say, okay, we blew it with Russiagate, but then you have all these others who are out there saying we must go on. That we're going to just keep on going here. Apparently, Representative Eric Swalwell continues to insist that the Steele dossier is absolute fact. He's still, yes, Trump did these things. He did all these things with these hookers in Moscow. None of it's been disproven. Well, of course, you can't prove a negative anyway.
Right.
What's missing, of course, is substantiation. But I mean, that's how desperate they are. I have this Steele dossier, and it's absolutely factual.
Yep, it is, and it's just amazing. And let's not forget, Pravda did say that we are going to get to see the United States go through the exact same thing that happened to Soviet Russia due to its own hubris.
Yep.
So I mean, whoever thought that Pravda of all I don't know, call it a news agency if you will, whatever, of all publications, Pravda got this right. Hey, thanks, Mike. We'll talk to you again.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. And we're going to switch over to Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha, Glenn. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Hi. Just I want to make a simple but very subjective point about the social psychology of the left. And I find this among the left-leaning people, Democrats I know, and it's true even of highly intelligent people with advanced degrees, sometimes especially them. And it's just a simple observation that they seem to be highly motivated by peer pressure. Like they're afraid to, like no matter how factual your facts are, when you present them, they have a dyed-in-the-wool, my mind's made up, don't confuse me with the facts attitude. But they seem to be very much like insecure adolescents at a junior high school cafeteria table. They're terrified of saying anything that might get them kicked out of the cool kids table.
Well, you're absolutely right about that. And yeah, it does pervade academia. And unfortunately, one of the reasons why our science is, I think, lagging behind the rest of the world is that the process of getting a college degree, for example, in the sciences, an advanced degree rather, is that you basically have to pledge fealty to previous generations' conclusions. If somebody was going out for a PhD and challenged the Big Bang Theory, they'd never get their degree. And they know that going on in. So they're going to try and find some way to resolve all the numerous contradictions and paradoxes within the current theory. And even if they don't succeed, yes, he's a believer. He believes in the Big Bang. Yes, here is your degree. Here's your diploma.
Right. Well, and I'm sure that the right wing has its peccadillos and faults and problems, but like the left also, there's this pervasive sense of a pseudo-intellectuality with the left too. Like someone who's really doesn't have that much on the ball thinks that by affiliating with left, it makes them we're the intellectual side.
You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. And the reason for that is very simple. When liberalism first got going, it was the intellectual crowd. It was basically on college campuses and so forth. And, they made no bones about the fact, we are smart, we have education, and we've got plans for the country. And you're absolutely right. People who don't have a lot of marbles, who are not quite Mensa material, if you will, or whose college degree is in, art history major or something like that, they say, I'm a liberal, therefore I'm intellectually superior to all the conservatives around me. And, I've met people like that. We have a friend of ours who's a liberal, who's absolutely convinced of her intellectual superiority, even though from my point of view, it's not quite there.
Yeah, I mean, people would have trouble following the recipe on a box of brownies, I'm like, you don't know much. But anyway, yeah, so yeah. But this cool kids table thing, this peer pressure motivation and this terror of admitting to anything, no matter, I mean, evidence, like this. This is all, Trump himself said, bring out the whole report, make the whole report available. I think they need to do that. But,
I agree.
And even when presented with all these evidence of all this lying that's going on, many they don't react with horror that people have departed from the truth. They react with horror that their lie has been exposed.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, look at the outrage, and we're talking about Americans. I think should be relieved that first of all this is all over, and maybe breathe a sigh of relief that Trump wasn't selling out our country to Russia. But no, the reaction is, oh, we have to find something else, and just this foaming hatred at the mouth.
Right. Not to mention the flaming hypocrisy associated with the election interference thing, coming from all the objection about this meddling in the elections, coming from a country that regime changes nations all over the world.
Absolutely. And plus, of course, the fact that the growing awareness among the American people that our political system is being meddled with on a massive scale by Israel. And, if Russia had any influence in the 2016 elections, it was microscopic, ineffectual. Nobody can really document it happened. It's based on the idea that some people in Russia were posting to social media. That's basically it. And
right. Well, to quote Deep Throat, if you follow the money about who's greasing the skids on campaign donations, that's a little more conclusive.
Yeah, absolutely. Follow the money.
Yep. All right, Mike. That's all I had. Thank you.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open again. So getting into the war zones here, Mike Pompeo has requested $500 million to finance regime change in Venezuela. And they're not even trying to hide it again. This is the United States saying, we, the exceptional nation, have a right to go into other countries, overthrow the legitimate elected government and impose puppet rule, just deal with it. Now, of course, for most of us, this idea of the U.S. going into Venezuela and overthrowing their legitimate elected government sounds like meddling. And then, of course, you have Mike Pompeo out there saying, well, Russia needs to get on out. We won't tolerate their meddling in Venezuela here. So the message we're getting from the administration is that our meddling is good and Russia's meddling is bad. And that's all you dumb American voters need to keep thinking about, because that's what they think you are. They think you are really, really dumb and you're going to fall for all of this stuff. All right. Venezuela got hit with a third blackout. This one did not last as long because apparently Venezuela's electric grid understands what happened the first two times, and they were poised to basically respond much more quickly. But Moscow is out there saying that basically they're convinced this is Western sabotage, and part of the problem is that these electrical substations use equipment manufactured in Canada, which means the United States government can go up to Canada and get all the algorithms and software and vulnerabilities in order to target the Venezuelan power grid. And there's an object lesson for the rest of the world. If the U.S. can do it to Venezuela, they can probably do it to you. So now is the time to start hardening your electrical system in terms of interactions with the net. And I understand with a distributed electrical system, you have to rely on the internet for portions of it to talk to each other. Okay. So basically, there was a new attack on Venezuela's electric grid. Power was restored in most parts of Venezuela within just hours. Okay, apparently Juan Guaido, who is still driving around Caracas, was actually attacked by citizen passerbys. He was leaving the offices of the National Assembly, and this was not an organized protest. It was just people in the street recognized who he was and came on up and just started pounding on his car. He's not popular. Any idea that this guy represents the new face of Venezuela as seen by the Venezuelan people? No. And interestingly enough, he's no longer has status as a representative to the National Assembly. So interesting development here. Now, Donald Trump is out there thumping his chest and warning that Russia must get out of Venezuela and all options are on the table. And he's responding to these 2 plane loads of Russian troops, which are in Latin America, under the terms of a 2001 cooperation treaty. So Trump is talking tough, saying all options are open when it comes to getting Russia out of Venezuela. I seem to recall something similar being said about all options are open about getting Russia out of Syria. How did that work out? Mike Pence is calling on Russia to withdraw its support of Maduro and stand with Juan Guaido. Well, okay, Donald. Okay, Mike. Here are your rifles. Here are your parachutes. Here are your day-glow orange jumpsuits left over from the CIA torture centers. Watch your heads climbing into that transport plane, and we're going to call Maduro and tell him you two are on your way to whip his butt all by yourselves. But the American people, we're tired of war. We've had enough of wars. We've had enough of seeing our country rot away from neglect because all the money is spent on bombs and bullets and weapons. We're going to sit this one out. So you two toddle off and have some fun here. Over in Pakistan, their prime minister is accusing India of having caught war hysteria. Now, things have calmed down since this recent incident following the terror attack on the caravan of Indian soldiers, but the tensions are still high. And with weeks left before this crucial election, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Hindu nationalist Bharatiya Janata have been upping the belligerent rhetoric. They're campaigning on war with Pakistan, trying to appear to be strong before the voters take to the polls. So, yeah, it sounds like war hysteria. There is this think tank, the Institute for Gulf Affairs, and their founder and director, Professor Ali Al-Ahmad, in an interview in Sputnik, said the Yemen war is doomed to rage on after 4 years of conflict. It's not stopping. And the headline said it's a civil war. It is not a civil war. This is the U.S. trying to reimpose the puppet ruler the Yemenites threw off. That's what's going on in Yemen. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I've heard a lot of commentary about this Russia thing. And the thing that I'm not hearing enough of, but people should be talking more about, are the Republicans, the never-Trumpers. The guys like Lamar Alexander and Croker and John McCain, who couldn't get in front of the microphone fast enough and accuse the president of treason. Guys like that Burr, the Senate investigator, who would talk about the Russians getting involved in our election every chance he could, just feeding into the frenzy. I mean, the Democrats, as crazy as they are the opposition. But it was the never-Trumpers, the neocons, the guys that didn't like Trump, that really fed into it. Remember the 17 intelligence agencies saying Russia interfered in our election? All that just helped to demonize Trump and make him appear to be...
Joe, that claim that all 17 intelligence agencies said Russia interfered in our election, that was also fake news, and the intelligence agencies came on out and said, no, we never said any of that. So,
well, that came right from Hillary Clinton, but it was
wow, Hillary Clinton. There's the authoritative source.
Yeah, but once again, it gets to my point about the Republicans just going along like megaphones, amplifying the lie and the fraud against Trump. It just goes to show that Trump's major enemy isn't really the Democrats. It's really the deep state. And it's the intelligence agencies, and it's the never-Trumpers. It's guys like William Kristol and Jonah Goldberg, all these people that really hate populism. They're all in the bankers' pockets. I mean, why do you think they demonize Russia? It's just because Russia nationalized its banks and didn't let the oligarchs continue to rape the country. So,
Okay, now to be technically correct, Joe, to be technically correct, Russia did not nationalize the banks. They took control of them, but the banks are still owned by their original owners. So let's strive for a little accuracy here.
Well, that might be true, but they did take control of them. I mean, that's better than, you got to admit that the oligarchs, the Rothschilds, all the big banking families, they're really pissed about Putin coming in there and blowing their control of Russia.
Well, that's absolutely true. I mean, that was the moment when Russia went from being this buddy-buddy with the United States to, does not get a Christmas card list.
Yeah, and I just, like I said, as crazy as the Democrats are, I'm more mad at the Republicans. They've never defended this president. Whenever I called Lamar Alexander about something like, why don't you stand by Trump, this is all baloney, he'd send me like a letter about the Russian involvement in our election, which would have nothing to do with what I was asking him to do. But, these people, like I said, Trump's really got to focus his anger, not just at well, of course the Democrats, but it's really the deep state Democrats and the deep state Republicans.
Well, it's the deep state in general, and yes, there's a lot of Republicans in there, and we should be angry with all of them. And you're absolutely correct. We shouldn't just focus on the Democrats. We should focus basically on everybody who pushed this Russiagate story, regardless of political party or affiliation. And especially, we're going to go after that corporate media. Anyway, listen, Joe, we got to let you go. We got to take a station identification break. Back with hour number 2 after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And I just got an email relative to Joe in Tennessee's phone call where he mentioned we're not hearing from John McCain, and the sender of the email saying that might have to do with the cost of a really, 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 really long distance call. So we have some very sharp people listening to this show. Okay. Getting on back to the international situation, analysts are saying that Trump's Middle East peace deal will die very quickly. This is coming from Professor Gabriel Ben-Dor, head of the National Security Studies Program at the University of Haifa. And, of course, tensions are already high with Trump's moving the embassy to Jerusalem and his recognizing Jewish sovereignty over the Golan Heights, which has just annoyed everybody out there. But the deal of the century is what Trump likes to call it. It isn't going to go anywhere. I mean, it reads like a California divorce settlement. Israel gets all the goodies, and Palestine has to give up their right of return. It's completely one-sided. Palestine's not going to go for it. Meanwhile, the fight in Gaza is continuing. Israel has struck Gaza again. Rockets from Gaza were intercepted by Iron Dome. Now, I want to go back to that first rocket, the one that damaged that house, because we had a caller the other day saying that Hamas had admitted it was theirs and it was launched by mistake. Actually, no. That was the rockets that were fired 3 weeks ago. So we still don't know who fired that first rocket that set all of this off. And we cannot rule out the possibility that it was fired by an agent provocateur so that Netanyahu can campaign on the dead bodies of the Gazans for his upcoming election here. So far, the Israeli airstrikes have damaged 500 Palestinian homes, and Palestinians are now stocking up on food because they think the Israeli airstrikes are going to continue. Apparently, Israeli jets fired 2 missiles at a commercial building in the upscale Rimal neighborhood in Gaza City, which housed the offices of Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader of the Hamas movement. This attack wounded 2 Palestinians, caused excessive damage to the property and surrounding homes. And here is the payoff here. There are reports saying that Israel has demanded the cancellation of this Friday's mass protest marking the 1-year anniversary of the Great March of Return. It's 1 year this Friday, during which Israeli snipers have killed nearly 200 Palestinians. So that's something that Netanyahu wants. He's tired of the world paying attention to the Great March of Return. And, obviously this being the 1-year anniversary, a lot of people are going to show up. And would Israel just haul off and attack them? Oh, they're massing for an invasion. It's not a protest. Look how many there are. It's a coming invasion. I hope they go forward with the Great March of Return. I hope they stand their ground. I hope they leave their children at home. But, when you back down from a bully, they bully you some more. And that's what's been happening with Israel. Not just in Gaza, here in the United States of America. When you let yourself get bullied, you're going to get bullied more. It never goes away. The only time a bully goes away is when you pop them one in the snot locker, bloody their nose real good, and send them running. Now, Russia's foreign ministry is calling for the ending of Israel's bombing of Gaza. And in a statement, the foreign ministry described the Israeli bombing of the Strip as dangerous and warned it might renew the armed conflict between the two sides and lead to the killing of civilians. Probably already has. The Russian ministry called for both sides to show restraint and return immediately to a sustainable ceasefire, stressing that stopping violence and reaching solutions for Gaza and achieving sustainable peace in the region necessitate the resumption of peace talks based on UN resolutions and the Arab Peace Initiative. Well, unfortunately, the problem is everybody has to agree to peace. It takes only one person to keep the war going. And right now, Netanyahu sees his fortunes improving by getting a good war going. And if it's not going to be with Gaza, it's going to be with Iran. Because he thinks that's going to help him win election against Benny Gantz. Meanwhile, the UN's special coordinator for the Middle East peace process is saying the violence in Gaza may lead to devastating consequences. Well, 500 homes hit, a couple of commercial buildings blown up, who knows how many people already injured. It's already a catastrophe. If you were to see what Gaza looks like, it is a catastrophe. It's a giant open-air prison. It's worse than the Warsaw Ghetto. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. We're talking about Israel and Palestine. Netanyahu is out there saying that Trump's Golan endorsement proves that Israel can keep occupied territories. It doesn't prove anything at all. Trump had absolutely no authority to go on out and say, yes, we're going to break off this piece of Syria and give it to Israel. And we know where Netanyahu is going with this. His next move is to get Donald Trump to, recognize the annexation of the West Bank. That's going to be coming. We've been hearing talk about annexing the West Bank for years now. So Netanyahu is feeling his oats, so to speak. So from now on, Israel's going to say, well, we're annexing your territory and it's now part of Israel because the United States of America said it's okay, even though the United Nations and pretty much every other government on earth said no. But Netanyahu's going to say, Trump rules the world and he says it's okay. Actually, I ruled the world through Trump, but Trump says it's okay for me to do all of this stuff. Syria has requested a UN Security Council meeting on the Golan Heights. It will be hugely symbolic as long as the United States has that permanent veto. But the Council is actually meeting today on renewing the mandate of the UN peacekeeping force deployed between Israel and Syria in the Golan, known as UNDOF. And I don't know. Again, the U.S. may simply veto that one, and Israel will simply move on in, and there will be a war between Syria and Israel, and Russia will come in on Syria's side. The U.S. is already committed to coming in on Israel's side, and there we'll have the U.S. and Russia shooting at each other. Ooh, what a lovely war it will be here. Now, Russia's Putin is going to meet with Lebanon's president to discuss the U.S. decision to recognize Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights. And, actually, apparently this took place yesterday. And Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said, such decisions undoubtedly have negative consequences from the point of view of a settlement in the Middle East and the general atmosphere of political settlement in Syria. Yes, absolutely. What Trump did basically kicked over the anthill. That and the moving of the embassy. And Trump, he's pro-Israel. And he never made any secret about that during the campaign. And I was concerned as to just how pro-Israel he was going to be. But I didn't imagine it was going to be this damaging. Because he could, in his reckless davening to Tel Aviv, ignite a regional war. Over at the Arab League, Secretary General Ahmed Abul Gheit is warning countries that move their embassies to Jerusalem risk their relations with the Arab world. And he added the embassy's transfer is illegal. It does not change the situation, and it does not earn the occupation any legal status. It was all about image here. Again, getting on back to Lebanon, Speaker Nabi Berri, following the visit of U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, dismissed it as just another visit from an American official biased toward Israeli interests and said it changed absolutely nothing. In other words, Mike Pompeo didn't get anything. Waste of taxpayer funds to have sent him there. Now, the United States has hit Iran with new sanctions for evading the existing sanctions. And it's kind of ironic. Nothing Iran is doing is illegal. They're just running their money through different channels in order to engage in commerce. And the U.S. attitude is, how dare you not just sit there and suffer under our sanctions? How dare you move outside the dollar and through other countries that won't enforce our sanctions? Well, we're going to sanction you some more. And you get a sanction, and you get a sanction, and you get a sanction. Apologies to Oprah. Okay. Now, a very good question, or actually it's a statement, this is from Russia Insider, that the U.S. and Israel will force a crisis with Iran to keep Netanyahu in power. Maybe, maybe not. I think if Netanyahu gets a really bloody war going on in Gaza, that will be enough for him to campaign on. But according to this article, they're saying the situation is that they may provoke this crisis as a campaign issue. And it's somewhat reminiscent of the October surprise that helped bring Ronald Reagan to the White House. Now, if you're my age, you will remember all of the stuff about the October surprise. Back then, the Reagan campaign team, led by William Casey, secretly negotiated with Iranian representatives to prolong the U.S. Embassy hostage crisis past the 1980 election, which allowed Reagan to use the continuing standoff as a wedge issue to attack Carter's foreign policy. And this was following that mysterious rescue effort launched by the Carter administration, which failed and basically landed in the desert. A lot of people thought it had been sabotage here. Mind you, when William Casey did this, he was in violation of the Logan Act. Everything they did was absolutely illegal. So anyway, Reagan won. The hostages were released. Reagan provided the hardware that had been promised to Iran, which eventually became Iran-Contra. So are they going to try and do something dastardly to provoke another crisis with Iran? Trump's Syria envoy, Jim Jeffrey, is saying that, yes, the war will continue. How many weeks ago was it when Trump got up there and said, yep, the war's over, ISIS is defeated, we're going to bring our kids home? Nope, not going to happen. The war is going to continue. In a press conference yesterday, Jim Jeffrey said the defeat of ISIS will not result in a U.S. withdrawal from its illegal occupation of Syrian territory. In fact, he said the U.S. would continue to support the anti-Assad vetted Syrian opposition fighters. So now we're back to, we're going to get the evil Assad. And meanwhile, Turkey is saying, over our dead body, the U.S.-Syria policy makes no sense. Yeah, it does. From the U.S. point of view, they want to get Assad. They want to regime change another country. And maybe Trump's recognition of Israel's sovereignty over the Golan was meant to provoke the start of a wider conflict that the U.S. could step on into. Oh, we must help our friend Israel against the evil Bashar al-Assad. Meanwhile, the Pentagon is sustaining their budget for arming the local anti-IS and apparently now anti-Assad forces in Syria. So they keep flipping back and forth. Remember, it was originally Assad's gassing his own people, which turned out to be a lie. Then it was, oh, we're not here making war on Syria. We're here as part of the war on terror to get ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And then the U.S. kept missing ISIS and Al-Qaeda and kept on bombing Syrian infrastructure. Now ISIS and Al-Qaeda are pretty much gone. And the U.S. is back to saying, well, yes, we still have to get back to getting rid of Bashar al-Assad. Don't you get tired of being lied to? Don't you get tired of all the bovine excrement that they're pouring all over you? This is about oil and oil pipeline rights of way and currencies the oil is being sold in. That's what your money is being spent on. That's what your kids are being killed and crippled for. Meanwhile, we're getting yet another warning from Russia's United Nations envoy that the militants in Idlib are preparing to stage more chemical attacks to blame on Bashar al-Assad to basically give the U.S. justification to come back in. And as I've always said, to determine if you're being lied to, look for what should be there and isn't. And what isn't there is a motive for Assad to use chemical weapons. He knows that would open the door for a U.S. intervention, and he doesn't need to use chemical weapons. He won the war. And why, if he was going to use chemical weapons, were they used on women and children rather than the militants? Well, women and children were targeted to maximize the emotional value, the shock, so that you would see these poor targeted women and children and you'd go, oh my goodness, those poor suffering Syrians, and your brain would shut down. And you wouldn't think, am I really getting the true story here, or is this another version of Saddam's nuclear weapons or Russiagate? And yes, it is. Alrighty, over at the USS Gerald R. Ford, they've had it out on what they're calling post-shakedown availability, which is they're sailing it around and trying to see what works and what doesn't. Apparently, more faults have surfaced in the propulsion system, and the elevators are still not working correctly. This ship was supposed to be ready this summer. Now they're hemming and hawing and saying, well, it'll be sometime toward the end of the year. If then. $13 billion. And a lot of experts are saying it's not really equipped to survive in a real combat situation. Turning to our domestic politics here, Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is basically going after Netanyahu after he made remarks about her in his speech at AIPAC. And basically was out there saying it's not all about the Benjamins. It's about the special relationship that Israel has with the United States of America. Translation, Israel has your politicians by the gonads. And Omar hit back on Twitter saying, this is coming from a man facing indictments for bribery and other crimes in 3 separate public corruption affairs. So game, set, and match to Ilhan Omar. Now this one I really love. This was just so good. Over in the United States Senate, they voted down Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal unanimously. 57-0. The Democrats couldn't bring themselves to vote for it, so they merely voted present. And she went into a meltdown. Didn't get a single yes vote, even from the Democrats. And she's a little upset about that. So she's out on Twitter out there saying, the GOP's climate delay is costing us lives and destroying communities. Iowa, Nebraska, and many in the Midwest are catastrophically flooded right now. Yeah, they are. And you know why? Because everybody was pouring all the money into global warming research and not making sure that our flood control infrastructure was being maintained. And that's why the floods are so bad, because apparently numerous levees have collapsed. Alexandria, you were all looking in the wrong direction. You were looking at Al Gore's face and bowing and saying, St. Al of the Gore. Global warming, global warming, global warming. Huge amounts of money into global warming, solar panels, windmills, ethanol production, and meanwhile, the flood control system that deals with the fact that snow does melt in the spring weren't being maintained. We got to take a break for commercials. We got a caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. And once again, I would like to thank you as well for your continuing support of Republic Broadcasting, keeping us on the air, keeping us getting the truth out there. And the reality is that it's still probably, for a lot of people, still settling in. For the last 2 years, corporate media got Russiagate wrong. And independent media, including Republic Broadcasting, we had it right all along. So with your continued support, we're going to continue to hold corporate media's feet to the fire. So thank you. All right, let's go to the phones. Tony in Puerto Rico, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Do you think Trump still has time to put on those brass knuckles? And do you think Hillary is going to be indicted along the way?
I would like to see somebody reopen that investigation into the email server. I mean, James Comey came on out and admitted she committed felony violations of Title 18 and saying we're not going to charge her. And by the way, that was not James Comey's job to recommend whether she'd be charged or not. That was up to the Attorney General. But apparently Loretta Lynch didn't want to take the heat for that. But, you know, Comey basically said she didn't mean to do wrong. That's not an excuse. You know, Title 18 does not require intent. The specific part of Title 18 that she violated says if you negligence, recklessness, carelessness, you're still in big trouble. And again, Judicial Watch has found even more classified emails that were routed through her unsecure non-state government server. That's the Title 18 violation right there. Somebody needs to do something about that. We can't have anybody in this country who is that above the law.
Right, but if Hillary does get indicted, do you see the government crumbling?
I see a lot of people panicking because Hillary knows where all the dead bodies are buried and how they got to be dead bodies. And I'm sure that's how she's, been holding elitist and energy efficient. And probably a lot of them already have done so anyway. But apparently there's been another billboard put up in New York City trolling Ocasio-Cortez after Senate Democrats refused to support her on this thing. And the billboard said, hey, AOC got the green raw deal blues after that Senate vote. Maybe no one liked the 93 quadrillion price tag. Now, the billboard references a February report that from the American Action Forum suggesting the Green New Deal could cost up to $93 trillion over a decade. See, that's a million billion. Yes, 93 trillion, not quadrillion, trillion. Just so many zeros to keep track of here. All right, as you know, this week, the AIPAC conference is taking place, and Democrats are taking the stage to pledge undying fealty to Tel Aviv and talking about the strong relationship between Israel and the United States, promising to police the American people against criticizing the government of Israel. They're actually up there promising to do that. No mention of the Palestinians, no mention of the illegal Israeli settlements. It's just up there, total pandering. Now, history has had despotic states that will war against their own citizens who criticize their own government. That's a given with oppressive, wicked regimes. But what kind of a bizarro world are we living in when the United States government disallows criticism of a foreign government? And apparently Mike Pompeo, during his appearance at AIPAC, was the one out there promising, you know, the United States will police their citizens for anti-Zionist sentiments, saying that the only reason people are opposed or critical of Israel, it's racism, it's anti-Semitism, it's Jew hate. We got to take another break for commercials. We'll be back with 2 phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. The phone lines are really loading up, but before I start taking phone calls here, a couple of things I want to get through. First of all, there's a breaking news story. This is coming from Senator Rand Paul, who has just tweeted out, a high-level source tells me it was Brennan who insisted that the unverified and fake Steele dossier be included in the intelligence report. Brennan should be asked to testify under oath in Congress ASAP. Definitely. Okay, up in Chicago officials are furious over the prosecution's decision to drop all charges against Jussie Smollett. And apparently the Empire writers are now taunting the public, which I don't think is a smart thing to be doing. I don't think it's going to reflect well on the show. And apparently recused state's attorney Kim Foxx has been identified as the person behind the decision to drop the charges against Jussie Smollett. This is coming from a police union source, and of course the Empire Star is still the subject of a federal probe. Now, the fact that Kim Foxx was still involved in the case is being explained away by apparently spokesperson Kira Ellis said that Kim Foxx never formally recused herself or the state's attorney's office from the case, that when she had made the announcement on TV that she'd recused herself, it was more of a colloquial use of the term rather than its legal sense. Apparently, clerks at the Cook County Courthouse have gone on out saying there were no written motions filed in dismissal of the Smollett case. There was no formal motion to dismiss, no paperwork whatsoever. Now, Rahm Emanuel is out there saying they're making fools of us, and he's demanding to know what the heck went on behind the scenes here. Piers Morgan came a bunch of files, so there are some files out and about on this case for people to look at. Meanwhile, in a show of complete arrogance and not...
Real quick, you know, this is how the media gets everything. It's these people in their church.
...learns from their past embarrassments. I mean, they were hugely embarrassed over Saddam's nuclear weapons. They were embarrassed over the claim that
victims cause someone to disbelieve in you or disbelieve in anything. Okay, that just start killing their spirit to believe in what's right and what is just. Okay, to me, he's a straight-out psychopath. And let me just say this to the blacks or whoever, the gays or the half-Jewish blacks who want to support him. I'm going to take a quote from Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan. In this case, the needs of the many definitely outweigh the needs of the few, or this one. All right, but I was calling about Venezuela.
Okay.
And here today from the so-called Associated Press. I call it Disassociated Press.
Okay.
They're reporting that while on the story that you reported earlier, that Guido was attacked trying to get to his car. At the same time, Trump announced that Russia and Putin had to get out of Venezuela. Guess who he's meeting with? Fabiana Rosales. That's Guido's wife.
Yes.
And now the Associated Press is reporting this. Don't be surprised if you get knocked off and they use your wife as a bellowing cry. All right. Now, one more thing.
A mess. It is absolutely a mess. Now, I did see that TV segment where Donald Trump had Guido's wife at the White House and basically was describing her as the first lady of Venezuela, trying to just continue to sell this idea that Guido is.
Yeah, I just had two things I wanted to say. One thing is, in that video.
Yeah, I did notice that.
Yeah, and nobody talks about that. There's this weird, he's got like these slogans written on his rifles. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of weird. Nobody mentions that about his rifles. You know, I mean, come on, man. The guy had these weird, I just go like, you know, what could we do with that money? I mean, seriously, you know, what could a society do with all that money if they weren't throwing it at all of this just insanity, you know?
Well,
it just always blows my mind.
Could fix up our infrastructure. We could have made sure those levees weren't going to collapse. I mean, anybody who was paying attention to the snowpack from this last winter had to know it was going to be a bad flood season. And somebody should have stood up and said, hey, we need to basically go on out and spend the money to make sure those levees are not going to collapse. And nobody did that. Yeah. It's climate change. Yeah. It's climate change. We can use it to get more. And yeah, the result of it is probably one of the greatest agricultural disasters to hit this country.
Oh, Michael, we've got, I live right below Tahoe, and Tahoe has gotten like 40 feet of snow. I mean, it is so thick up there. It's just absolutely mind-blowing how thick the snow is. It's going to last until July 4th. They're going to keep the ski lifts open, you know?
Yeah.
So, but anyway, going back to the money, I just trip out on, you know, I mean, billions and trillions, you know, and they're like, oh, well, we can't do anything for homeless vets or any, you know, it just blows my mind. It's like, you know, so who's pocketing all this money?
The military-industrial complex is pocketing it. Wall Street is pocketing it. Israel's pocketing a lot of it. You know, it's just being.
And where does all that money come from? I mean, I pay 30% a year in taxes, so I'm just a small axe on a big tree, you know.
Well, most of that money is being borrowed. That's the problem. You know, the United States government, they've got the income taxes, corporate taxes, tariffs, import duties. I mean, all of that stuff that they raise money with. And when they've spent all of that, they just go to the Federal Reserve and say, print up some more for us. And, you know, somebody down the future will pay it all back with interest.
That's right. Yeah, I was at the store the other day, and they were talking about $100 bill counterfeits being passed around, and I told the gal at the counter, I said, you know, the Federal Reserve is the only people that's allowed to counterfeit money. They don't want any competition.
Yes, true.
All right, buddy, I'll let you go, man. Thanks a lot for your show, bro.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, good day, Michael. Michael, in the logical sense, let's talk about Smollett and the letter. The FBI, why would they even allow the 16 charges to drop until that FBI had studied the letter? Where was the powder? The powder was in the letter. I don't care if it was sugar. Smollett wrote that letter to himself right there. It's 5 years in a slammer for writing that letter. Now, let's get back to Smollett again on the charges. Chicago PD did a thorough investigation. They used 16 detectives, and you're trying to tell me I think they spent over $1.5 million, and this guy's going to pay $10,000 to get off? And actually, when he's trying to start a race war in this country, and all Trump supporters are all a bunch of haters and this and that, he's the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the United States. And, Michael, let me tell you something. With the last caller, before the last one, was talking about Venezuela. Well, let me tell you something. Venezuela, if you know what the Monroe Doctrine stands for, Donald Trump cannot allow Russia to come in to the South American continent and take over Venezuela. That's bullcrap to me. Brazil would not allow that because Trump and Brazil would probably
I don't think Russia is trying. Hang on, Tom. I don't think Russia had any intention of coming on in and taking over Venezuela. They're business partners. You know, Russia's got economic interests in there, but that's not taking the country over. The issue is it's the United States that is taking over countries. And by the way, the Monroe Doctrine does not cover places like Iraq and Syria and Libya and Afghanistan. So don't
You're
Monroe
right. You're
doctrine
100%
me.
right, Michael. You're right. You're right about that. I'm talking about South America, but Michael, again, I told you in the past that who's holding propping up Maduro is Cuba. The Cuban intelligence apparatus is in Venezuela, not the Venezuelans. Okay, we know that. Look, they don't even have cooking oil in Cuba. I can tell you that right now.
Oh, wait a minute, Tom, you got to stop calling in here with all of this stuff that you're picking up off of Twitter feeds here, because there have been reporters in Venezuela who have gone into the supermarkets with cameras, and they're seeing there's all kinds of product there, including cooking oil, including toothpaste. And there's people in there, buying product. And
Michael, I didn't say Cuba. I didn't say Venezuela. I said Cuba doesn't have cooking oil. I didn't say Venezuela. I said Cuba doesn't have cooking oil because Venezuela's not shipping over a lot of stuff now because of what's going on over there. Cuba is the one that's suffering, not Venezuela. I didn't say Venezuela.
Okay, I stand corrected on that one. But the reason Cuba is suffering is because the United States has, for going on, 60 years now, maintained a blockade and embargo against Cuba in their petty little revenge for the Bay of Pigs.
I agree. I understand that, Michael. But getting back to Venezuela, it's supposedly Venezuela has a duly elected government by the voters. I don't know how it actually went down with Guaido, but from what I'm hearing in all the press here in South Florida, when they talk about it, because remember, we're right here. They have little Venezuela over here. Like they have a little Cuba here in Miami. But I can tell you this, Michael, when it comes to Venezuela, I guess there is a duly elected government. It was elected by the voters, and this guy Maduro don't want to step down. Well, that is a dictatorship, because if the guy's not going to step down and let the dual process of the vote
Wait a minute, Tom. Okay. First of all, Tom,
I'm here waiting.
Maduro won the election. All right, we're going to let you go. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go back to the phones to another Tom. This is a different Tom. This one's in Connecticut. So, aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I find it very odd that the person who screamed the loudest about Russian interference, Hillary Clinton, has not made any statements at all. Her mouth has kind of been shut.
Yeah, she's only made one statement since the Mueller report came out, and that was about climate change.
And she was supposed to have all the slam dunk evidence to show this was absolutely the truth. And it's just very, very, very compelling to think that she has nothing to say about this.
Yes.
But anyway, that's all I got to say today. Thanks, Mike. Take care.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. We're going to switch over to Michael in New York. Aloha, Michael. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Well, I'm going to get to Smollett, but I think Hillary's got to lay low now that the spotlight's off Trump, and maybe going back on her with Benghazi and Uranium One and her Russian connections and collusion. I think that's why she's kind of being timid again, and hopefully that spotlight's going to shine bright on her as it should, and get her, Barry Soetoro, and the rest for a high treason with the Uranium One scandal, and get her on the Benghazi massacre as well, while she was Secretary of State.
Yes.
The Tom that called in about Venezuela and Russia, I know Tom, I'm sure, is a patriot, and all patriots, we got to remember, our mandate as a constitutional republic is not to be the policeman of the world. Let all the countries, all these other governments, let all the people of these other countries, let them figure out their own problems. If they want to try socialism, whatever, and it don't work out, let them resolve it all. If they want us to help them in some kind of fashion of support that we feel we can offer, okay, fine. But Russia's not our enemy. Russia is no longer communist. We ought to get out of Russia's backyard as well. I mean, let's not be hypocrites. If we don't want Russia in our backyard, let's get out of their backyard in military respect. Especially with Barry Soetoro and then even G.W. Bush. They were building up troops all along Russia, Ukraine area, interfering with Ukraine, trying to get them to rebel, et cetera, et cetera. So let's just realize as Americans, our mandate is to take care of ourselves, secure our borders, and as hell unleashes in these other countries because they can't get it together, let's make sure our borders are secure so they don't start invading us like they're doing in Europe under this refugee UN crap. And on Smollett, I hope, I don't know, Michael, I haven't been keeping up with it. Maybe somebody has come out from like Trump's administration or Trump himself or some higher courts going after the judge and Smollett, saying that this is, again, a criminal activity to undermine a legitimate case that the Chicago police have presented as clear criminal activity from this guy Smollett. And if nobody's doing that yet from Trump or any higher court in Illinois, etc., that also is a signal that this is pathetic. Because somebody should be going after that judge, Smollett, and anybody else trying to just let this skate away, while others have been persecuted far worse for accused of doing much less than this Smollett character's gotten away with.
Absolutely. And Michael, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to let you go. We got to take a station break, and we'll be back with hour number 3 after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, and we're going to take some phone calls here, starting with Robert in California. Aloha, Robert. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I hope you and Claire are doing well.
We're doing okay, thank you.
Oh, good. Yeah, meanwhile, our government isn't.
They're in trouble. They're tearing themselves apart.
Well, something keeps coming to my mind. And, I was one of those people that started noticing this early on, like years ago. But isn't it getting to the point where there's enough populace realizing the corruption in our government now that, people will stop paying it mind? When are we going to stand up and start doing something about this?
Well,
or are we going to watch our country just fall apart?
Right now, we're glancing over our shoulder to make sure we're not being followed by whoever it is we're being told we should be afraid of. And that's really what's going on with all of this, fanning up race hate, getting the gays and the straights angry at each other, men against women. The U.S. government is trying to fragment the U.S. population so that we can't pull together and stand up as a single American people to oppose them. And it's an old, dirty trick. They were pulling it back in the 1960s during COINTELPRO, and I wish people would really wise up to that. And even with this political correctness stuff about, everybody being offended so that we're afraid to speak out on any topic because somebody might be offended. Well, I think that comedian from Australia, I'm blanking his name, Stephen something, had it right. Be offended. I don't care. Because you can't have free speech.
Oh, no, you're right.
In an offense-free environment.
No, you're absolutely right. One of the biggest bases of our freedom of speech is to be able to say what we want, and if somebody doesn't like it, they're welcome to ignore it and go on with their lives. Oh, God, and this Jesse Smollett thing is just starting to make me be really upset with people who like to lie.
Well, the problem with him being just let go like this, it sets a dangerous precedent. First of all, this could have resulted in some black people just starting to shoot random white people. And I'm glad that did not happen, or it's not being reported as happening. But this is now sending a message that it's okay to fake hate crimes and get media attention, as long as it's pushing the agenda of there's a race war and white people are bad and Trump supporters are bad, or heterosexuals are bad. Let me see if I cover all the bases. Or anti-Semites are bad. And the guy just skates. I mean, this cost him about $10,000, but he makes a lot of money off of his gig with Empire.
Yeah, I really hope they're about done with him. I noticed the actors on the Empire set are kind of split about the whole thing, and I don't want to hash over it. I'm actually not really interested in giving Mr. Smollett any airtime, but, the whole precedent, it's like you said, man, we've got such a chance for other people to repeat this process right now that we're looking at a dangerous situation.
Agreed.
And I'm just really hoping that there is a way that we can actually rein this in. I mean, we need a whole lot more public involvement. Obviously, that's not happening. I just don't even know what to say about it. I keep trying to talk to my neighbors, and I have the disadvantage of living in California. Most of my neighbors are liberals. They're ready to call the cops on me when I try to tell them the truth.
Yeah, I've run into that here in Hawaii. And, liberals, for all this talk about inclusion and diversity, they as a group tend to be very closed-minded to anything but the liberal universe. They're not willing to listen to other points of view. And
I don't know. I think they want to include every one of us. I think they want to include all of us onto a roster so they can track us and subjugate us to their authority. And they want to include every one of us.
They want to include us all as long as we're willing to convert to liberalism.
Yeah. Well, Mike, that's about all I got today. I really appreciate what you guys do, and God bless you, man.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and switch over to Joe in California. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Mike, I have a question on the Mueller report. I got in a little late. Just wanted to ask you first, you mentioned numerous times that you were once a magician.
Yes.
Did you have a signature trick?
Boy, that's going back a long way. I mean, this is how I paid for my college education. I invented a few small card tricks, and I got to work the amusement park circuits. I got to do the Playboy Mansion, and when I was in Great Britain, I got to visit the Magic Circle, which is their private magicians club, like the Hollywood Magic Castle, because there's sort of a reciprocity agreement. And I actually got to meet Prince Charles there. And apparently he was into magic all those many years ago. And I taught him something that I'd invented. But signature trick, not really. I preferred close-up. I did stage magic, but I preferred the close-up stuff.
Did Prince Charles give you a lecture on global warming?
No, that was way, way before Al Gore came on out with all of this stuff. No, back then he was a very pleasant gentleman, and he was just enjoying being the prince.
Okay, Mike, the previous caller sort of, before I get to Mueller, sort of stole my thunder. You mentioned this hoax of the Mueller, the Russiagate and all, which was confirmed. But I think there's a bigger hoax, and the previous caller referenced this, that most Americans, a lot less than in past years, but most Americans are under this spell that we still live in a democracy and the U.S. is a source of good around the world. That's a problem. I'm wondering if they're going to be, or more and more people need to be disabused of that idea.
Well, this nation was never intended to be a democracy. We're a republic with a democratically elected leadership that is supposed to be held to limited power. That part hasn't worked out very well. As far as the United States being a source for good in the world, it's kind of hard to imagine anybody that is paying attention to what's going on still thinking that that's true.
The problem is most people either aren't paying attention or they're still watching the corporate media. That's the problem.
Well, that's going to change. I mean, if you look at Rachel Maddow's numbers just since Monday, I think the American people just had their grand awakening, their Buddha on the road moment relative to the corporate media. I think we're going to see numbers dropping all over the place.
I hope so. On the Mueller report, I'm just curious. I mean, why isn't it being released to the public? I mean, I feel like the public, we paid for it. We paid the salary of Mueller and his army of Democratic lawyers and aides and assistants. Why? I mean, haven't prior reports by independent counsels been released to the public? I mean, I recall
some have, some have not. Some have, some have not. There's always that thing about, national security, and we have to keep it secret here. But Trump wants the report made public. The Republicans want it made public. Apparently, the Democrats are now flipping, and they don't want it released. And I just saw a crawl on Fox News where apparently Barr is now talking about a timeline for the release of the full report. And also on Fox News, Judge Napolitano, who was right on top with pushing this whole Russiagate thing, his response to the Mueller report is saying, just you wait until the full report is out. There's evidence of conspiracy in there, and Trump's opponents are going to have a field day. Conspiracy to do what? Mueller found nothing. And it's like this whole thing. They're talking about, they're pushing conspiracy to do nothing and obstruction of justice in a case where no crime was committed. I mean, that's how desperate these people are.
You said Judge Napolitano said that?
Yep.
Oh, I thought he was a Trump supporter.
He had been, but lately he seemed to be like kind of turning on him.
Maybe he's upset because he got passed over for the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I think that's exactly when it happened.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to switch over to Tom in Idaho. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, what's happening with you, man? Well, everything that's going on is pretty great, I think. The Jussie Smollett thing's magical. For the simple fact is, they dropped the charges. But as it comes with Trump, I think he has some stuff that he absolutely, unequivocally has to get done in the next, 10 days. Otherwise, he's going to be screwed. But
I agree.
I could be wrong.
I mean, this is his moment, and he should be taking advantage of it. Instead, he's out there, with Guido's wife and treating her like the First Lady of Venezuela. He gave out a posthumous Congressional Medal of Honor today. And you know what Trump is really missing is a real shark of a political advisor. Because it almost seems to me like during these first 2 years, in terms of the political sense, he's been drifting. Now, he's being led around by the nose in terms of foreign policy. But in terms of, supposedly getting ready to run for re-election in 2020, I don't know who's in charge of his campaign, but he needs a political advisor that's going to whisper in his ear saying, look, right now, the American public are on your side. The corporate media has, hoisted on its own petard, and now's your time. Come on out with the FISA documents. Just do something to show that you're resurgent, that you're ascendant, that you're putting on those presidential brass knuckles. Like I said, I'm going to give it 2 weeks, and if Trump hasn't taken advantage of this window of opportunity in 2 weeks' time, then he's a write-off. He's never, ever going to stand up and be a leader.
Yeah, and I think, too, if you look at all of the things going on with our government anyway, God, do they look terrible. Just absolutely terrible. They look like who they actually are, a bunch of liars and thieves.
Yes.
I personally don't align myself with political parties because I don't align myself with known liars and thieves. I mean, that's just something every day. Nowhere in society do we allow people like politicians and how they act to be. I mean, if you're a drug head or druggie or whatever, clearly that's your kind of people. But the average person would never allow somebody like these politicians to be part of their life. With the Smollett thing, good God Almighty, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, look at the optics on that. That is terrible. And then just everything. Oh no, he's lying. Mueller's a Russian agent.
Yeah, now they're saying he's incompetent. Now they want William Barr to testify before Congress as to just how he could come to the conclusions he did based on the Mueller report. I mean, they're not willing to let go. They're absolutely not willing to let go.
Well, when you lie, you have to keep up with it.
Yes, you
and
do.
That just compounds the lie to more lies, to more lies. To me personally, I think it's great that's what's happened, but it also further reiterates to me, in my opinion, that we are headed for a government collapse pretty quick. Because if you look at all of the stuff that's going on, you have these states saying, oh, we're not going to put Trump on the docket and all this stuff. Where do they think that's going to lead them? And like you were talking about earlier about how Google skewed searches and,
yes.
All this other stuff that was going on. Yeah, maybe we should do the mid-election, the midterms over again. For the simple fact is, I think that it would be a lot harder for the opposition people to create some environment to where they are in control of everything. So say we had it in a week. That's not enough time for them to get their stuff together and, do some fraud stuff. But, I mean, who knows? I think it's great. I don't care. I think they're all liars and thieves. Even guys like Rand Paul, who seemingly comes off as a legitimate guy and all that stuff. He knows what happens. He knows what goes on in the government. And yet I want to see somebody get up there and one of these things and one of these politicians start lying, and then they're like, you're a liar, you're lying. Oh, I'm not lying. And just punch somebody in the mouth. Because at some point people are going to be over it. And I think a lot of Americans are over it, for the simple fact is, look at all this crap. You know, Rand Paul, he's part of the problem too, because he doesn't do anything about it. I mean, if you get how many politicians, we'll say 5, just say this is all crap, these guys are liars, they're scamming this, yada yada yada. They can't account for twice the national debt. Like I lost $20 in the laundry. We have a rule at my house: if you don't take your clothes out of the dryer and somebody else does, that's your money. So,
it's a good rule. It's a good rule, because I'm doing the laundry here.
Well, it makes people do their own laundry. It's just crazy. I just can't believe the level of what's going on. And, you know, there is also something, I don't know if you know about this, but there is a Middle East cat. I forget what his name is. He's quite popular. He did an interview with, I believe it was Comedy Central.
Yes.
And the guy who was interviewing him was, you know, saying basically kind of somewhat Middle Eastern racial slurs, and they try to edit the interview to make this Middle East guy look bad. And I'm sure somebody will bring it up, but he actually set his phone down and had it recording the entire time. So when they put out their thing, which they made it seem like it happened months ago, but they made it seem like it was just for the thing that happened in New Zealand. And he recorded the whole thing secretly. And so they put out this thing, and they made the guy look really bad, like he was anti-Muslim and, you know, all this stuff. But he had a secret recording going on the whole time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just more and more of us finding out that they're all liars and thieves. It's all a game. It's all a show. They're all actors.
You know what it reminds me of? Do you remember the movie They Live? It was this real low-budget movie, and there was this big thing over these sunglasses, these sunglasses, where when you put the glasses on, you saw the world as it really was, and all the mind control that was going on, and you know the aliens that were among us, which we could substitute politicians. And there was this wonderful scene where the guy with the sunglasses, he's trying to get somebody else, just try the glasses. And the guy says, I don't want to try the glasses. And they literally get into a fist fight. And we're seeing a lot of that right now. But bit by bit, I think the American people are waking up. And I think the full ramifications of the corporate media's embarrassment over the Mueller report have yet to play out. I think for a lot of people, it's still settling in. There are probably a lot of people who are, you know, just now catching up to it, where their friends are saying, do you understand what happened on Monday? The Mueller report came out, and there was no Trump-Russia collusion. The corporate media lied to us. Again, look at Rachel Maddow's numbers, and I think we're probably going to see a similar drop in numbers across all of the corporate media.
Well, yeah, too. And you had a lot of people, because, you know, you intermix with people. And so you have a lot of people, you're at bars, restaurants, whatever, at work, and people are talking about, oh, Trump this. Well, what do they say now? You know, I think they've kind of come to this point to where they're like, ooh, okay, maybe I was bamboozled, because, you know, they were talking. I mean, somebody did a video, and I think it was like over 300 times or something like that over the last 2 years, that all of these liberal-leaning, well, they're all liberal-leaning now, even Fox News. Smoking gun, we got him now. You know, all of these little, you know, sentences about how we got him this time. Oh, he's got this time. Oh, he got nothing. And then the internet thing in Europe.
Yep.
Oh my God. I just think that I just turned 40 last month. So, you know, I have friends that are older in their 60s and stuff like that. And they have never, ever seen anything like this. This is complete craziness.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show, why is it that these politicians hang on so hard and they're so shady? Is because they are mentally ill people who are willing to do anything to have a piece of power.
Yeah, they are. They're sociopathic behavior, and they're on medication. Did you know there's actually a pharmacy inside the Capitol building? And
yes, I remember you talking about this, and I've told people about this. You look at people like Nancy, you know, these are supposed to be the elite, the super intelligent, blah, blah, blah. These freaking morons have like a 55 freaking IQ. because they can't put sentences together. You ask a simple question, they're like, and you're like, what the hell's going on? You know, in their attempt with AOC to try to skew that really, really hard line they were pulling, and they're like, oh, she's saying too much. Nope, saying too much. And that's what I tell about people. They're like, oh, you know, Omar, she hates. I go, you know what she said, right?
Yeah.
What she said? She said that AIPAC isn't registered as a foreign lobby. Like
yeah,
they should be
which
by
is
law.
absolutely true. Tom, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials.
Bye, man.
We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones here to Miles in Maine. Aloha, Miles. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Aloha, Michael. First, I wanted to say to Tom in Florida, you know, we're with you, brother, but you got to slow it down so we can understand, catch it all together, and you got to quit listening to Dave Hodges with this Cuban people in Venezuela craziness, because I haven't seen anything that proves that. I don't know if you have, Michael, but I haven't.
No, I haven't either. And part of the problem is that there are a lot of entities that are pouring deliberate bad information onto the internet and the independent media to try and make us look kooky to drive the audience back to the corporate media. But after this grand plongée of Russiagate, I think the corporate media is in serious, serious trouble. And I know that my readership is going up, and we've got a good listenership at RBN. We don't know exactly what it is because we're not on Arbitron. I know that this show is the darling of the Part 15 hobby transmitters across the country, and thanks to you all for carrying my program. Yeah, and, you know, there, and I don't want to name names, but yeah, there are websites out there that exist solely to put out nonsensical stories. I saw one the other day which said that Queen Elizabeth had died, and you know, they're made to look like they're serious news sites. It's not a humor or satire site. It's not like it's The Onion where it's obvious what you're being told is, humor. And by the way, we're coming up on April Fool's Day, so everybody has to be extra vigilant that you're not being fed a joke story.
Yeah, and I just wanted to also mention back to Venezuela. You know, if the U.S. really wanted to do something and show some gratuitous gesture, why they knew all those people were starving. Why didn't they airlift food like they would do in all these other nations and all this other kind of stuff? Why didn't they go in there with food, water, and this whole what they used to randomly do just in general? And they didn't do anything like that.
Well, they had that stunt they pulled at that one bridge between Colombia and Venezuela. But I mean, look at the utter hypocrisy. The reason the people of Venezuela are in such trouble right now, even before the U.S., trying to change their government, is decades of U.S. economic warfare and exploitation by the bankers. And it's a repeat of some of the stuff that we saw the U.S. government doing in places back in the 1960s, 1970s, places like Nicaragua, which is why most of South America does not like people from the United States.
And then I wanted to hit back on that Russian commentary. And do you recall during the debates when Trump said if there was some impropriety of the election from outside, if it wasn't, I forget exactly how it went, but if it wasn't something substantiated, that he would go with the election results, and Hillary Clinton said, no, I'll challenge him all the way.
No, it was the other way around. During the debates, Trump was asked that would he accept the results of the election, and he said only if there was no indication of election fraud. And immediately he was attacked by Hillary and Obama. How dare you imply our election system is not 100% honest and accurate? And then, of course, following the election, you had all these people who were out there screaming, "Oh, we've got to investigate the election. It had to be crooked." And then all of a sudden they said, "No, don't investigate the election." And Hillary basically went back to plotting her comeback. which apparently the latest word now is that if no strong front runner emerges by the fall in the Democratic field, that she's going to step back on in. I don't think she's going to do very well. She's going to try and steal the White House again, but I don't think she's going to have the base she had before because of all that's gone down. Right now, the Democratic Party is destroying its own brand with all this craziness, with the Russiagate thing, with the constant attacks on Donald Trump. Even people who think maybe Trump is not doing a good job, and I'm one of them, they're looking at the behavior of the Democrats and saying, we cannot have this as the leadership of the United States of America. You know, there's going to be the issue of Hillary's health. And of course, if she does step on back in, we're going to bring back all of the scandals that have followed her, going all the way back to the murder of Vincent Foster, right up to the rigging of the 2016 primaries to steal the nomination from Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, well, the hypocrisy has been amazing, and it's just a good thing we got independent media such as yourself to be able to document it and keep up with it, which brings me to my final point, people. In order to keep something like this going, we got to support RBN. $15, $20, $25 does a lot. So I hope everyone will contribute who can and as often as they can. And Mike, thanks for another good show.
All right. Well, thank you very much for those kind words, and thank you for that solicitation on behalf of RBN. And once again, the network does thank you. I thank you. We got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, here's an interesting little development. The Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee has warned political strategists and vendors that if they support candidates mounting primary challenges against incumbent House Democrats, the party will cut them off from business. How very undemocratic of the Democratic Party to do so. They're basically saying, if you try and support anybody who's going after the incumbent Democratic House members, forget about doing business with us. Speaking of Bernie Sanders, apparently his 2020 campaign has already been hit with a Federal Election Commission complaint, and apparently the problem has to do with some people who are working for his campaign, including Maria Belencisa, who's an illegal immigrant from Argentina, who's in the United States under the protections of the Obama-era Deferred Actions for Childhood Arrivals program. She serves as the Deputy National Press Secretary for Bernie's 2020 campaign and also collects a salary from Sanders' failed 2016 campaign. Well, here is the problem. CISA and two others, who are apparently foreign nationals, are a problem. It's a violation of federal election law because foreign nationals are prohibited from working in any capacity in the decision-making process of any person with regard to election-related activities. They want to keep the elections American. Now, whether this was a legitimate investigation or they're already trying to get Bernie out of the race, I mean, this is going to be a dirty campaign. Especially if Hillary is seriously thinking about stepping back in. You're going to see the Democratic candidates get picked off one by one. And starting with one of the strongest, Bernie Sanders. It's like what Richard Nixon did during his re-election with the creep and the dirty trick squad, where they basically derailed any Democrat who stood a chance of beating Nixon to make sure that Nixon ran against George McGovern. And of course, Nixon steamrolled over him, and then it all came out during the Watergate mess. Okay, Project Veritas is out with a new video. They're doing really good work. They continue to do really, really good work. And this new one has to do with voters who moved from New York to Florida, who are discovering that people in New York are still voting in their name. So there's still massive election fraud going on. This mess has got to be cleaned up. All right, let's talk a little bit about the economy here. Mortgage bankers suffered a record loss on originations in the fourth quarter, meaning fewer and fewer people are taking out mortgages. And I guess they're pretty desperate out there because now Fannie Mae is declaring support for illegal immigrants, mortgage borrowers who are here under the Deferred Action for Child Aliens Act. That's pretty darn desperate here. Half of older Americans have nothing in retirement savings. That's getting to be a major problem, especially with Social Security hovering on the edge of bankruptcy. And here is a good one. Apparently, Deutsche Bank has decided they're going to provide the U.S. House of Representatives with financial records related to President Donald Trump. And Representative Maxine Waters confirmed that a House investigation into the president's finances would involve details of the bank's relations with Trump. Again, they're coming back with more investigations. What are you investigating? What are you looking for? Oh, we don't know. We're just investigating. So apparently Trump borrowed millions over decades from Deutsche Bank, and they're now coming up with the paperwork. So Deutsche Bank does not respect its customers' privacy, which in my mind is a good reason not to do business with Deutsche Bank. Yesterday, we reported on how the Pentagon had identified or basically released $1 billion to go toward Trump's border wall. But apparently today, the U.S. House of Representatives Armed Services Committee basically blocked the plan. So again, the Democrats are just keeping that border open because, oh, they need those illegal immigrant voters. If all the illegals were shoved back over the border, or even if there was just a national voter ID law, the Democrats would be in real trouble in 2020. I mean, it's still only a guess how many illegal immigrants voted for Hillary in 2016, but it numbers in the millions. Over in Great Britain, Prime Minister Theresa May says that she will step down once Brexit is delivered. Once Parliament okays her deal and they move forward with the Brexit, she will step down. Her government is in trouble. Right now, there are 15 unfilled positions in her administration. She's just had resignation after resignation after resignation. Can't keep it put together. Now, on the lighter side of things, you know, March 29th was supposed to be the day Brexit was final. It's being delayed for a couple of weeks, but a lot of parties were being planned, and the attitude seems to be, let's go ahead and have the parties anyway. So March 29th, there's going to be parties all over Great Britain celebrating the impending arrival of Brexit. And let's see, event managers of a bash organized in Eastbourne, East Sussex, suggested that Brexit is happening whether we want it to or not, so we might as well be drunk. And that's the British for you. And I think looking at those celebrations might convince Parliament not to try and find a way to prevent Brexit at all, because then there will be yellow vests in the streets and it will be ugly. All right, let's talk about Captain Marvel. And the movie is out there. A lot of people are saying it is just pure pro-U.S. military propaganda. It's leftist in the extreme. And everybody's saying, well, you just hate Captain Marvel because she's female. No, that's not true. The audiences out there, you know, they didn't have a problem with Black Widow or Jean Grey or any of the other female superheroes in the comic books. It's just Captain Marvel is just so left, she turns the reading audience off. And now, social justice warriors are demanding that she be gay. You know, they want Captain Marvel to openly embrace the LGBT lifestyle. Whatever happened to comic books just as entertainment? So, it's amazing here. Over at Gonzaga University, they're going to host an event about whether the Disney hit movie Moana is really about rape. This is not from The Onion. I am not kidding you. A professor at Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington, is going to host an event challenging students to analyze if Disney's Moana is actually about rape and not about a strong young woman who saves her island from a curse. This is coming from philosophy professor Danielle Lane, and the event is jointly sponsored by the university's Women and Gender Studies and Native American Studies departments. Now, apparently this professor is set to argue that the Western patriarchy and masculinity at large attack the feminine through the environment and cultural differences. Now, I don't know about you. I've watched Moana. I didn't pick up on any of that. But apparently, Lane has issued this little newsletter to try and promote the event, and it says Lane will advance a controversial thesis wherein she suggests the film is an extended rape metaphor. That is really getting on out there. And by the way, how do things like this help college students get a job after graduation so that they can pay off those student loans? And getting even more ridiculous here, over at the School of Oriental and African Studies in London, students are demanding that Plato, Descartes, and Immanuel Kant should be dropped from the curriculum because they are white. Oh, and they're saying the majority of philosophers in our courses should be from Africa and Asia. Now look at who's being racist. Now, when I was in school, we didn't look at any of these people's faces for color or anything. We looked at the quality of their thinking. And that's why these men are famous. They were great thinkers. All right, out in Boeing land, apparently a Boeing 737 MAX had to make an emergency landing in Orlando. Apparently they had an engine problem. Now, the plane was not carrying any passengers because the Boeings are grounded for commercial flights, but they're still allowed to shuttle back and forth. And the plane was being taken out to Victorville, California, where Southwest is storing the airplane. But again, bad timing for Boeing. Right now, American Airlines is having to cancel 90 flights a day as the 737 MAX remains grounded. Now, the 737 MAX mess is just the tip of the iceberg of Boeing's problems. Remember, their main market is the military products, and apparently there are issues with the Space Launch System Heavy Rocket Program. Developed by Defense, Space, and Security Division, received flack from Congress amid repeated delays and expected cost overruns. Now, according to Giovanni Di Briganti, a defense analyst and editor-in-chief of DefenseAerospace.com, the problems faced by Boeing may be more than temporary and may in fact signal a much broader problem with the company and its management. And I would agree with him because of that decision to keep these two additional safety systems off the 737 MAX unless the airlines wanted to pay for them, pay extra for them. And here's a good one here. British Airways had an airplane that was supposed to fly to Dusseldorf, and instead it flew its passengers to Edinburgh instead. And the mistake was only spotted when landing, when the passengers were welcomed to Edinburgh. And according to one account, the pilot took a show of hands from passengers to see which ones had expected to land in Germany. And British Airways is saying it was a paperwork snafu. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. David in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, you when you're just talking about this, I think, the patriarch and all that. I think one of the better speakers on this is Professor. I blanked him out. Oh yeah, Jordan Peterson, because he blows holes in that whole thing with male privilege and all that stuff. Because And there's a lot of people like Ben Shapiro and a lot of other ones take them on, even Yiannopoulos, even though he's quite controversial. With a lot of times they block these speakers from coming, I think, because they have the goods, they have the data, and they don't want to hear data. It's just, for instance, they don't take into account, do women want to do all the terrible jobs that, some of the men do, the more dangerous ones, like working on a bridge and different things like that. But anyways, Jordan is one of the best things if you put in white privilege or put in, toxic masculinity. He just blows holes in that whole thing. So that's about all I wanted to say.
All right. Well, thank you for the reference, and we'll see about trying to get him here on the show. So thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. All right. They're starting to call it the bribe tribe, and that is all these teachers, professors, corrupt coaches, and profit proctors who made millions off of parents in this college admission scandal. And another name for it is Operation Varsity Blues. They're in court. They're all pleading not guilty. But apparently a dozen athletic coaches, test administrators, and others, including people who wrote term papers and took entrance exams on behalf of these rich kids, they're all in trouble. And this is a mess. It discredits the university system. These are some of the most prestigious universities in the country, the top universities, Yale, UCLA, places like that. And it's going to damage their reputation. It's damaging the reputation of American education as a whole, along with Common Core, which even Bill Gates now admits was a bad idea. And we're seeing the effect of Common Core. That whole flat earth thing, that nonsense out there. Apparently Forbes did a poll and found that only 2/3 of respondents are convinced that the earth is round. The others are kind of like not really sure. And believe it or not, the flat earthers are going to get their own reality TV show where they trudge on out to find the edge of the world. It's probably going to be as frustrating seeing a resolution to the show as The Mystery of Oak Island, where we keep hoping they're going to come up with something and they don't, season after season after season. Up in the Sierras in Donner Pass, they're still digging out from winter, and they've got another snowstorm coming in the way. Over in Greenland, there's this major Greenland glacier that was kind of the poster child, for the fastest shrinking ice and snow mass that the global warming people were putting on out there. And sorry to report, the glacier is growing again. So NASA is saying, it's only temporary. It's only temporary. Human-caused global warming is real. It's only temporary. But what we're looking at right now is the world's greatest agricultural disaster here in the United States of America. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers say rivers have breached at least a dozen levees in Nebraska, Iowa, and Missouri. And, of course, the politicians are out there saying, oh, it was climate change. It was climate change. They were shouting global warming. Why didn't you do something about it? Why didn't, instead of spending all this money on all these wars and blowing up all these other countries, go on out there and work on this critical infrastructure? Because we knew since last autumn this was going to be a bad winter. There was going to be a lot of snow. And when snow melts, there's a lot of flood water. And nobody did anything about it. And now we have farm fields that are drowned probably till May, which means no crops coming from them. 1 million calves have drowned, which means the beef market is decimated. There are going to be food shortages in this country. So yeah, come on, illegal immigrants, pour on in here and help strain our food supply even more. We'll be right back. Aloha America, welcome back to our show here, and we're talking about the massive flooding that's taking place in the Midwest and how the nation, the government, was unprepared for it, despite clear indications that it was going to be a bad flood season. You got a lot of snow, you got a lot of floodwaters. No, we have to go off and mess around in Venezuela and Syria. That's what's important. Governing is choosing, governing is prioritizing, and those farmers out there, they can take care of themselves. Well, not really. Part of the problem that we're seeing is that the flooding is so bad that a lot of the grain silos are collapsing. They're literally collapsing. Others are simply being flooded at the bottom, which means the grain in them is going to start rotting from the bottom up. And so we're talking thousands of tons of grain lost in Iowa. The flooding is taking place, causing damage in Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, Kansas, South Dakota, Minnesota, and Nebraska. And $3 billion in damage is estimated. And there will be food prices are going to go through the roof. There are going to be food shortages, which is why keeping that southern border open and allowing a flood of hungry mouths to continue to flood into our country is absolute insanity. It could lead to food riots and chaos. I think somebody once said was that it only takes missing 7 meals to go from civilization to anarchy. Down in Florida, their orange industry is in decline because of all of these hard freezes they've had in recent years. That has shortened their growing seasons. So they're basically saying global warming killed orange farming in Orange County, Florida. They just wanted to push that idea. Human-caused global warming. Global warming. What's all that snow? Forget about the snow. Just say global warming, carbon tax, obedience to a global environmental authority. That's all you need to think about. Don't look out the window. Don't look at the snow and ice. Insane. Just insane. NASA had to scrap their first ever all-woman spacewalk. Normally the spacewalks are done either with 2 men or a man and a woman. This was going to be the first ever all-woman spacewalk. Had nothing to do with sexism. One of the female astronauts decided she wanted a suit in a smaller size, and there wasn't time to get the suit configured in time for the walk, which took place last Friday. So a little bit of silliness here. Okay, ASUS software update platform was hacked, used to spread malware. This is coming from Kaspersky Labs. It really is out of control. By the way, there is a new system out there to try and protect email from spam and domain spoofing. It's called DMARC. You can find out about it at dmarc.org. It's a real pain to use, but it's apparently the way the industry is trying to fight back against all this abuse of our internet. Okay, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here, and I assume that John Stadmiller is following along. So stay tuned for him. He's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Thank you all for donating to Republic Broadcasting. It was really great when we had that hardware meltdown earlier in the month. Please share what you learned here with everybody that you know. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.